The rain came down upon Northamptonshire as if heaven itself had declared war upon the earth. It lashed the windows of Haverford Hall, a sprawling stone Titan crouched amid centuries-old oaks, and turned the carriage drive into a river of mud. Inside, the Duke of Ashworth stood before the library fireplace, one hand resting on the marble mantel, his back to the room. Alexander St. Clair, 7th Duke of Ashworth, had not spoken in 6 minutes. His steward, Mr. Brimley, stood near the door, his ledger clutched to his chest like a shield. "Your Grace, I thought it best to inform you at once. The matter is delicate." "Delicate?" The Duke's voice was low, carved from the same granite as his house. "You use that word to describe the arrival of 3 unannounced girls claiming my blood. They bear letters, Your Grace, sealed with the ring of your late brother." At the mention of Lord Edmund St. Clair, a ghost flickered across the Duke's features, there and gone. Edmund had been dead 11 months. A riding accident in Scotland, they said. A foolish, reckless end for a foolish, reckless man. Alexander had stood at the graveside, stiff-backed and silent, while the vicar praised a brother the Duke had not truly known for 20 years. "Their mother?" he asked. "The letters state the eldest, Miss Margaret, is 19. The twins, Eliza and Henrietta, are 17. Their mother was a Mrs. Clara Fairfax, an actress. She died of fever last winter." Alexander turned. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with dark hair cut severe and eyes the color of winter slate. At 34, he carried the weight of his title like a man born to it. His face was handsome in a severe way, high cheekbones, a hard jaw, a mouth that rarely curved. He wore black as he had since his father's death. Mourning had become his armor. "And where is this theatrical brood now?" "In the blue drawing-room, Your Grace. Mrs. Thistle has given them tea." "Tea?" The word was dry as dust. "The house prepares to drown in scandal, and we offer refreshment." He strode past Brimley, his boots echoing on the polished oak floor. The corridor stretched before him, lined with portraits of St. Clair's past, men in wigs and armor, women in silk and pearls, all wearing the same proud expression. He felt their painted eyes upon him as he walked. Judge not, the old adage warned, but the St. Clairs had always judged. The blue drawing-room was a cold space, all silver brocade and pale walls, designed for formal visits. As Alexander approached, he heard a sound that halted him mid-stride. Laughter. Low and warm, it rolled beneath the door like a forbidden thing. A woman's laugh, unguarded and infectious. Then another voice joined, a girl's, high and bright, and a third, murmuring something that drew another swell of mirth. He opened the door. The scene before him was not what he had expected. 2 young women sat on the settee, startlingly alike, sandy hair, freckled noses, quick smiles. Their dresses were plain but clean, the fabric soft from too many washings. They looked up at his entrance with wide, curious eyes. But it was the third who drew his gaze. She stood by the window, her back to the rain-streaked glass. She was older than the twins, perhaps 19 or 20, with hair the color of autumn chestnuts pinned loosely at her nape. Strands had escaped to frame a face that was not beautiful in the conventional sense but vivid. High forehead, generous mouth, eyes of a peculiar light brown that caught the lamplight like amber. She was not tall, but she held herself with a straight-backed confidence that seemed to fill the room. And she was still smiling. Even as she turned to face him fully, the smile did not falter. It simply settled as if she had been waiting for him. "Your Grace," she said, not a curtsy, not yet. "We were beginning to think the house had swallowed you." The twins exchanged a look. The air in the room changed. Alexander had faced hostile parliaments, scheming dowagers, and men who would see him ruined. He had never encountered a woman who looked at him as though he were not a duke, but an interruption. "You have the advantage of knowing my name," he said. "I have not yet learned yours." She curtsied then, a graceful dip that was almost mocking in its precision. "Margaret Fairfax, Your Grace, and these are my sisters, Eliza and Henrietta." Her chin lifted. Our father was Lord Edmund St. Clair. We have come to claim his recognition." The words fell like stones into still water. "Claim," Alexander repeated. "We have letters in his hand. He acknowledged us. He provided for us in his way." She gestured toward the small traveling trunk near the door. "When he died, our allowance ceased. Our mother is gone. We have nothing. So yes, your grace, we have come to claim what honor remains in the St. Clair name." The twins had gone very still. Eliza, or perhaps Henrietta, clutched her sister's sleeve. Alexander looked from one face to the next. The resemblance to Edmund was unmistakable now, the shape of the mouth, the tilt of the eyes. He felt something shift beneath his ribs, a weight he could not name. "You speak of honor," he said quietly, "but you arrive uninvited, on the eve of storm, with nothing but letters from a dead man. You must know how this appears." "We know how it appears," Margaret said. "We have been living with how it appears since we were children. We are not asking for love, your grace, only shelter, and the chance to prove we are not what the world will say we are." The rain hammered the glass. A log shifted in the fire. "You will remain here tonight," Alexander heard himself say. "Tomorrow we will discuss what is to be done. I make no promises beyond that." For a long moment, Margaret held his gaze. Then she nodded once, as if accepting terms in a negotiation. "Thank you, your grace." She did not look away. And Alexander, Duke of Ashworth, master of Haverford Hall and 100,000 acres, felt the ground beneath his carefully ordered life begin to crack. Dinner at Haverford Hall was a study in disciplined silence. The dining room stretched long and cavernous, illuminated by 3 chandeliers whose candles flickered with each gust of wind against the windows. The table, built to seat 40, now held only 5. The Duke sat at the head, his plate untouched. Across from him, the 2 twins sat close together as if drawing warmth from each other. And beside them, Margaret Fairfax ate with the quiet composure of a woman who had learned to survive on pride alone. The footmen moved like ghosts, removing the fish course, presenting the roast. The clink of silver against china filled the void where conversation should have been. "The storm will pass by morning," Alexander said finally, because the silence had become a thing with teeth. Margaret glanced up. "Will it? I find English storms linger in these parts." "You know Northamptonshire." "Our mother was born in Northamptonshire," Henrietta offered, then seemed to regret speaking. Her cheeks flushed. "Indeed," Alexander said. "And where did you reside before your journey here?" "York," Eliza said. "We kept a small house near the minster." "And before that?" The twins looked to Margaret, who set down her fork with deliberate care. "We moved frequently, your grace. Actors are not known for permanence." "Your mother's profession?" "Yes, she performed at the Theatre Royal in York for the last 4 years. Before that Bath, before that Norwich." She met his gaze. "We have lived in 7 cities. I can recite them if you wish." "That will not be necessary." The footmen cleared the plates. Margaret took a slow sip of wine, and Alexander found himself watching the line of her throat as she swallowed. He looked away. "Your brother," she said after a moment, "visited us twice each year, at Christmas and in early summer." The mention of Edmund hung in the air like smoke. "He taught us to ride," Eliza said softly. "He bought us books." "He always brought sweets from London," Henrietta added. "Peppermint drops." Alexander's jaw tightened. He remembered Edmund as a boy, charming and careless, stealing cakes from the kitchen and charming the housekeeper out of her wrath. He remembered Edmund as a young man, gambling away his allowance, disappearing for weeks, reappearing with that easy smile and some new tale of adventure. He had loved Edmund. He had also, at times, hated him. "You must understand," Alexander said, "that what you ask is not simple. I have a seat in the House of Lords. The St. Clair name carries weight. To acknowledge 3 illegitimate daughters of a disgraced younger son would invite scandal." "We are not asking for legitimacy," Margaret said. We are asking not to be thrown into the street. And what would you do if I gave you shelter? What would you contribute to this household? The question hung between them, sharp and sudden. Margaret's eyes flashed. I can keep accounts. I can manage a household. I can read Latin and Greek, thanks to your brother's tutors. I can play the pianoforte, though not as prettily as some. I can ride, shoot, and drive a cart. I am not decorative, your grace, but I am useful. And your sisters? Eliza is an excellent seamstress. Henrietta has a gift for gardening. We are not ornamental, we are survivors. The word should not have struck him as it did. Survivors. He thought of his own mother, who had died when he was 12 of consumption. He thought of his father, cold and distant, who had taught him that emotion was weakness. He thought of the loneliness that had wrapped around his heart for so long that he no longer recognized its absence. You speak boldly, he said. I speak honestly. I have found that when one has nothing, honesty is all that remains. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the expanse of polished mahogany. The twins held their breath. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock chimed 9. You will remain, Alexander said at last. Provisionally, I will assign you chambers in the east wing. You will be given proper mourning clothes as befits the death of a father. You will join us for meals. But you will not leave the grounds without my permission, and you will not discuss your situation with anyone outside this household. Is that understood? Margaret's lips parted, but for once she said nothing. Is that understood? He repeated. Yes, your grace. He rose from the table. The twins scrambled to rise as well, but Margaret moved with measured grace. As the Duke passed her chair, she spoke again, low enough that only he could hear. You are kinder than you wish to appear. Alexander stopped. He did not turn. Do not mistake duty for kindness, Miss Fairfax. Then do not mistake gratitude for weakness, your grace. He walked away, but her words followed him up the great staircase and into the darkness of his chambers, where he sat awake long past midnight, staring at the rain, wondering why the walls of his carefully constructed life suddenly felt like a cage. The days that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm. Margaret took charge of the East Wing with a quiet efficiency that both impressed and unnerved the servants. Mrs. Thistle, the housekeeper, reported that the young lady has rearranged the linen closet twice and scolded a footman for polishing silver with a dirty cloth. The butler, Mr. Havers, admitted that Miss Fairfax has a firm hand, your grace, but she is never cruel. Alexander observed these changes from a distance. He spent his mornings in the library with his correspondence, his afternoons riding the estate, his evenings dining in the formal room that now felt less empty. The twins blossomed under the attention of the household. Eliza took over the small conservatory, coaxing life from neglected rose bushes. Henrietta, it emerged, had a beautiful singing voice, and the music room no longer stood silent. Even the footmen paused in their duties to listen when she practiced. But it was Margaret who occupied the Duke's thoughts, often against his will. She had a way of appearing where he least expected, in the garden at dawn, her hair loose and wild; in the portrait gallery, studying his ancestors with an almost scholarly intensity; in the library, her fingers tracing the spines of books she must have thought she would never be allowed to touch. "Do you always rise so early?" he asked one morning, finding her in the rose garden with a book. She looked up startled, then composed herself. "Do you always follow your guests so closely?" "You are not a guest, you are a responsibility." The words came out harsher than he intended. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes dimmed. "Of course, your grace." He wanted to apologize. The impulse shocked him. Dukes did not apologize to actresses' daughters. He turned and walked back toward the house. But the image of her face stayed with him through the day. That evening he found a letter waiting on his desk. It was written in a careful hand, the paper cheap but clean. "Your Grace, I wish to thank you for the kindness you have shown my sisters and me. I know our presence is an inconvenience. I know you did not ask for this burden. I wish to assure you that I will do everything in my power to ensure we do not shame the St. Clair name while we remain under your roof. I remain respectfully, Margaret Fairfax. He read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer of his desk, where he kept the few things in his life that mattered. The following Sunday, the Duke announced that they would attend church in the village. The news caused a stir among the staff. The Duke rarely attended public worship, preferring the private chapel at the hall. But that morning, dressed in black with a cravat of white silk, he descended the stairs and found the 3 sisters waiting in the entrance hall. The twins wore new gray dresses with black trim, their hair neatly pinned beneath bonnets. Margaret wore black as he had never seen her before. The color transformed her. She seemed taller, older, more distant. Her amber eyes looked almost dark against the pale severity of her gown. "You look appropriate," he said. "How kind of you to notice," she replied. The carriage ride was silent. The church, a small stone building dating to the 12th century, was filled with tenants and villagers who turned to stare as the Duke of Ashworth entered with 3 unknown women in tow. Alexander took his seat in the family pew. The sisters sat behind him. The vicar, Mr. Appleton, preached on the parable of the prodigal son. Alexander listened with a face of stone. He could feel Margaret's gaze on the back of his neck. He did not turn. After the service, the village green became a theater of whispered conversations. The Duke stood apart, speaking with his estate manager, while the sisters were surrounded by curious villagers. Through the crowd, Alexander watched Margaret kneel to speak with a tenant's child, her face gentle, her smile genuine. Something in his chest constricted. "She has a way, doesn't she?" Mrs. Thistle had appeared at his elbow. "The villagers adore her already. She has been here 3 weeks. "Long enough," the housekeeper said, then added quietly, "Begging your pardon, your grace." On the ride back to the hall, the twins chattered excitedly about the church, the villagers, the promise of a harvest festival in the coming month. Margaret sat silently, her hands folded in her lap. "You were good with the children," Alexander said. She looked at him surprised. "I like children." "You would make a fine governess." It was the wrong thing to say. He saw the flash of something hurt, anger, cross her face before she turned away. "Yes," she said, "a fine governess, the natural end for a woman like me." The carriage fell silent. Alexander stared out the window, cursing himself for words he could not take back. That night he could not sleep. He walked the corridors of Haverford Hall like a restless spirit, passing through rooms that held too many memories. And in the east wing, he paused outside a door and heard a sound that stopped his heart. Margaret was crying. Soft, muffled, almost silent, but he heard it, the sound of a woman who would not let her tears be witnessed. He stood in the darkness for a long time, his hand raised to knock, then lowered. He could not comfort her. He had forfeited that right with his careless words. But as he walked away, he made a vow to himself. He would find a way to give her more than a governess's fate, even if it cost him everything. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, sealed with the crest of the Marquis of Thornfield. Alexander read it twice, then set it aside. The Thornfield Ball was the first great event of the autumn season, a gathering of the county's most influential families. To attend was expected. To bring 3 unacknowledged half-sisters would be scandal. But the alternative, leaving them behind, suddenly seemed impossible. He called Margaret to the library that afternoon. She entered with the same composed expression she wore during every encounter, as if bracing for battle. "You sent for me, your grace." "I have received an invitation from Lord Thornfield. There is to be a ball at Thornfield Park on Saturday next." He watched her carefully. Her expression did not change, but her hands tightened at her sides. I am happy for you, your grace. I hope the evening is pleasant. I intend for you and your sisters to attend. The silence that followed was absolute. Attend, Margaret's voice was faint. A ball with the nobility of the county. You will need appropriate gowns. I have arranged for a modiste from Northampton to come tomorrow. She will see to you and the twins. Margaret took a step back. You cannot be serious. I am always serious, Miss Fairfax. The scandal would be, she stopped, shaking her head. Your Grace, we are not suited to such society. We have not been trained. We would embarrass you. You will not embarrass me. He rose from his chair and crossed to the window, putting distance between them. You told me you could play the pianoforte, read Latin and Greek, manage a household. You told me you were survivors. A ball is simply another form of survival. With different weapons, she said quietly. He turned, yes, and you will learn to wield them. The modiste arrived the next morning with an army of assistants and trunks upon trunks of fabric. The east wing became a whirlwind of silk, muslin, and ribbon. Eliza and Henrietta were delighted, exclaiming over colors and patterns. Margaret submitted to the process with the grim resignation of a soldier preparing for war. Alexander did not see the gowns. He did not need to. What mattered was the transformation he witnessed on the evening of the ball. The three sisters descended the staircase at 7 o'clock. The twins wore matching gowns of soft rose, their hair dressed in ringlets, their faces bright with nervous excitement. They looked exactly like what they were, young women on the edge of society, hopeful and afraid. But Margaret... The world stopped. Her gown was deep forest green, the color of ancient woods. It was cut simply with a high waist and long sleeves, but it draped her figure in a way that made Alexander's throat tighten. Her hair was pinned in an elegant arrangement, revealing the graceful line of her neck. A single emerald, his mother's emerald, he realized with a jolt, rested at her throat. Mrs. Thistle stepped forward, wringing her hands. I thought it appropriate, your grace. The jewel belonged to your mother, and with the young lady having no adornments of her own. It is fitting, he heard himself say. Margaret's eyes met his. For once she looked uncertain. If you object, I will remove it. I do not object. The carriage ride to Thornfield Park took an hour. The sisters sat in a row across from him, a trio of nervous tension. Margaret stared out the window, her profile illuminated by the passing moonlight. You are quiet, he said. I am composing myself. For what? She turned to look at him. For the judgment of strangers, for the whispers behind fans, for the moment when someone asks who we are and the room falls silent. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. I am preparing to survive, your grace, as you instructed. The carriage stopped before a great house ablaze with light. Music drifted from open windows. The door opened, and Alexander stepped down, then offered his hand. The twins descended first. Then Margaret took his hand, and he felt the warmth of her fingers through her glove. She held his gaze for a moment, then released him. Stay close, he said. They entered the ballroom. The effect was immediate. Heads turned. Fans rose. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. The Duke of Ashworth, who had not attended a ball in 3 years, had arrived with 3 unknown women. The eldest wore his mother's emerald. The twins held each other's hands. Lord Thornfield, a portly man with a jovial face, approached with his wife. Ashworth, what a pleasure, and these charming ladies. My wards, Alexander said smoothly. Miss Margaret Fairfax and her sisters, Eliza and Henrietta. The lie, if it was a lie, rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. Margaret's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly, curtsying with perfect grace. Miss Fairfax, Lady Thornfield said, her voice cool but not unkind. How lovely to meet you. I do not believe I am acquainted with your family. We are from York, Margaret said. Our father was a scholar. We have recently come under the Duke's protection. The story was simple, plausible, and utterly false. Alexander felt a strange surge of pride as she delivered it without flinching. The evening unfolded like a delicate dance. The twins were swept into conversations with other young ladies. Margaret remained at the edges, watching, learning, and waiting. She did not dance, though several gentlemen asked. She declined each with a polite smile and a murmured excuse. But when the last dance was announced, Alexander crossed the room to where she stood. "Dance with me," he said. It was not a request. Margaret hesitated. "You cannot mean that." "I do mean it. You have spent the entire evening watching from the shadows. It is time to step into the light." She placed her hand in his. The music began, a slow waltz. He drew her onto the floor and the crowd parted around them like water around a stone. She danced beautifully. Her steps were sure, her posture perfect. But it was the way she looked at him that stole his breath, as if she were seeing him for the first time and what she saw frightened her. "Why did you call us your wards?" she asked softly. "Because the truth would harm you. And you care about harming me." The question was barely a whisper. The music swirled around them. His hand tightened on her waist. "I care," he said, "more than I should." Her lips parted, the dance ended, and before she could respond, a voice cut through the crowd. "Ashworth, what a delight to see you after so long." Alexander turned. A woman was approaching, tall, elegant, with golden hair and ice-blue eyes. She wore crimson silk that suited her cold beauty perfectly. Lady Cassandra Whitmore, the woman he was expected to marry. And beside her, the man who had once been his closest friend, the man who had betrayed him, the man who had vanished from society 7 years ago. Lord Edmund St. Clair. Alive. Margaret let out a small, choked sound. The room seemed to tilt. Alexander stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Edmund," he said. His brother smiled, the same easy, charming smile from their youth. "Hello, Alexander. I believe you have met my daughters." The music stopped. No, Alexander realized. The music had stopped several moments ago. The entire ballroom had fallen into a stunned hush, hundreds of eyes fixed on the scene unfolding at the center of the floor. Lord Edmund St. Clair stood before them, alive and smiling, wearing the scars of 11 months he had apparently not spent in a grave. Margaret's hand had gone cold in Alexander's grip. He felt her tremble, once, violently, before she pulled away. "Papa," the word came from Henrietta, who had pushed through the crowd with Eliza at her side. Both twins stared at their father with expressions of bewildered joy and terror. Edmund opened his arms. "My darlings, my dear, dear girls." The twins rushed to him. Margaret did not move. Alexander watched his brother embrace the two younger sisters, watched the tears stream down their faces, watched the crowd's whispers rise like a gathering storm. His mind raced. Edmund alive. Edmund here. Edmund publicly claiming daughters he had never acknowledged in life. "You are supposed to be dead," Alexander said, his voice low and deadly. Edmund looked up, still holding the twins. "I know, I owe you an explanation, brother, and you shall have it, but first," he turned to Margaret, extending a hand. "Margaret, my eldest, you have grown into a woman of remarkable strength. I have heard of your courage from Lady Cassandra." Margaret did not take his hand. "You let us believe you were dead." Her voice was steady, but Alexander could hear the splintering beneath it. "You let us mourn you, 11 months. We sold our possessions. We buried our mother alone. And all the while you were—" She stopped, shaking her head. "Where were you?" "I was in Scotland, as they said, but not dead, imprisoned." The word fell like a hammer. "Imprisoned?" Alexander stepped forward. "By whom?" Edmund's smile faded. "By men who wished to use me against you. I cannot say more here, but I escaped. I have been recovering in London under Lord Thornfield's protection." He gestured toward their host, who had appeared at the edge of the crowd, pale and anxious. "I wanted to return to you, Alexander, but I needed to understand who had betrayed me first. The orchestra, uncertain, had begun to play again, a low, nervous melody. The crowd dispersed reluctantly, though every eye remained fixed on the St. Clair brothers. "We must speak privately," Alexander said. "Now." He led them to a small study off the ballroom. Margaret and the twins followed. Cassandra Whitmore attempted to enter as well, but Alexander blocked her with a look that made even her flinch. "This is family business," he said. "You are not family." The door closed. The four of them, five, counting Edmund, stood in a tense circle. "Explain," Alexander said, "from the beginning." Edmund drew a breath. 3 years ago, I became involved with a group of investors in Edinburgh, wealthy men who wanted access to St. Clair lands for a railway line. I declined. They did not accept my refusal with grace. When I returned to Scotland last year, they seized me. They wanted me to sign over my rights to the estate, rights I do not possess, as you know. I refused. They held me in a hunting lodge in the Highlands, trying to break my will. "Who are these men?" Alexander demanded. "Their leader is a man named Sir Percival Grant. He sits in Parliament. He has influence. And he wanted my connection to you, Alexander. He wanted leverage." "Leverage for what?" Edmund's eyes flickered. "Your vote. There is a bill before the House of Lords, the Northern Railway Expansion Act. If passed, it would grant Grant and his associates control over vast stretches of northern land. Your opposition could destroy the bill. Your support could ensure its passage." Alexander felt the pieces click into place. He had received letters, threats disguised as entreaties. He had ignored them. "So they took you," he said slowly, "because they could not touch me." "They tried to touch you through me." Edmund's gaze shifted to Margaret. "And through my daughters. They knew about the girls. They knew I had kept them secret. They threatened to expose them, to destroy their reputations if I did not cooperate." Margaret's face had gone very white. "Us, we were in York, we had nothing." "You had me," Edmund said softly. "And men like Grant know that a man's children are his greatest vulnerability." The room fell silent. Alexander's mind was churning. "You escaped how?" "With help from someone inside Grant's operation, a servant who took pity on me. I made my way south to London, where I contacted Cassandra." He hesitated. "She has connections. She hid me, helped me recover my strength." "Cassandra Whitmore," Alexander said flatly. "The woman who once promised to marry me and then left without explanation. You trusted her." Edmund's smile was rueful. "She had her reasons for leaving you, brother. Reasons she may explain in time, but yes, I trusted her. I still do." Margaret spoke then, her voice sharp as a blade. "And when did you plan to tell us, your daughters, that you were alive?" Edmund flinched. It was the first crack in his composure. "Margaret, I wanted to come to you sooner, but I had to be certain Grant's men would not follow. I had to ensure you were safe." "Safe?" Margaret laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "We were never safe. We have never been safe. We have been invisible children, hidden away, denied a name. And now you stand here, alive, speaking of protecting us, while the world watches and wonders if we are legitimate or merely the byproducts of a scandal." The twins had begun to cry again. Eliza pressed her face into Henrietta's shoulder. Edmund took a step toward them, but Margaret moved to block him. "You do not get to embrace them," she said. "Not yet. Not until you have earned back the right to call them your daughters." Edmund's eyes glistened. "Margaret, we thought you were dead. We wept for you. We were turned out of our home. We came here with nothing but letters and the desperate hope that your brother might have more honor than you. And he did. He took us in. He clothed us. He brought us here." Her voice broke. "And now you return from the grave and call us your darlings." She turned and fled the room. Alexander moved to follow, but Edmund caught his arm. "Let me go to her." "You have done enough." Alexander pulled free. "Stay with the twins. They need you. Margaret needs," he hesitated. "She needs time." He followed Margaret through the back corridors of Thornfield Park, past startled servants, through a side door into the cool night garden. She stood by a stone fountain, her back to him, her shoulders shaking. "Leave me," she said without turning. "I cannot." "Why not? I am nothing to you, a responsibility, a burden, a potential governess." She whirled to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That is what you said, a fine governess, the natural end for a woman like me. That was cruel of me, I was wrong. You were honest, and honesty is all I have ever asked for." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "My father is alive. All these months he was alive, and he did not come for us. He came now. Too late." She sat heavily on the edge of the fountain. "He came too late to save our mother, too late to save us from poverty, too late to spare us the humiliation of begging at your door." She looked up at him, her amber eyes bright with tears. "Do you know what it felt like, to stand on your doorstep with nothing? To know that my father's brother might turn us away and we would have nowhere else to go?" Alexander knelt before her, heedless of the damp grass soaking into his trousers. "Tell me." The simple words seemed to undo her. She covered her face with her hands and wept, not the soft, muffled tears he had heard through her door, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. He did not hesitate. He pulled her into his arms and held her. "I have you," he murmured against her hair. "I have you, Margaret, you are not alone." She clung to him, her fingers curling into his coat. The night wrapped around them like a shroud, and still he held her, as if his arms could shield her from every cruelty the world had ever dealt. After a long while her sobs quieted. She pulled back slightly, her face upturned to his. Moonlight silvered her tears, and in that moment she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Why do you care what becomes of me?" she whispered. He did not think, he did not calculate, he simply told her the truth. "Because you are the first person in years who has made me feel anything at all." And then slowly, giving her time to pull away, he lowered his mouth to hers. She did not pull away. The kiss was gentle, a question rather than a claim. Her lips were cold from the night air, but they softened under his, and for one suspended moment the world fell away. Then she drew back, her breath ragged, and pressed a hand to his chest. "We cannot," she said. "I know. I am your brother's daughter. You are not my niece by blood, you never have been. The world will not see it that way." She stood, smoothing her gown with trembling hands. "The scandal would destroy you, and after tonight," she stopped, pressing her fingers to her lips, "after tonight everything is different." Alexander rose, his heart hammering. "Nothing has to change, we were never seen." "You know that is not true." Her voice was quieter now, steadier. "People will have noticed us leaving the ballroom, the servants will talk, and my father, your brother, he has already seen enough to guess." She looked toward the house, where light spilled from the windows like spilled honey. "This is not the time for foolishness." "And what is it time for?" "For finding the truth." She turned to face him, and her expression had hardened into something resolute. "Someone tried to use us against you. My father says these men are dangerous. If they learn that he has returned, if they learn where we are." "You are safe at Haverford Hall." "Are we?" He said they have influence in Parliament. He said they had spies. "What makes you think your house is beyond their reach?" She shook her head. "I will not be used as a weapon against you, your grace. I refuse." He stepped toward her, but she held up a hand. "Please, we must return. My sisters will be frightened, and the evening is not yet over." "Margaret." She looked at him, and he saw the war in her eyes, the longing, the fear, the fierce determination. "Do not ask me to choose between my family and my heart," she said. "I have only just found both." She walked back toward the house, leaving him standing alone in the garden. When he returned to the study, he found Edmund packing, the twins huddled on a settee, their faces streaked with tears but calm now. Margaret stood by the window, her back to the room. "Ah, there you are," Edmund said. We need to discuss Grant. He will know I have surfaced. He will act quickly. Let him, Alexander said. I have spent 7 years building a network of allies in Parliament. I have the ear of the Prime Minister. If Grant wants a war, I will give him one. It is not that simple. Edmund lowered his voice. Grant has proof of my connection to the girls. Letters, portraits, witness testimony. He will use them to discredit both of us. He will claim that I faked my death to escape debts. He will drag the girls through every newspaper in England. Margaret turned from the window. Then we must give him a different story. The room went still. What do you mean? Eliza asked. Margaret moved to the center of the room, and Alexander saw the transformation in her, the actress's daughter emerging from the shadows. The only weapon Grant has is our illegitimacy. If he cannot use that against us, he has nothing. But it is the truth, Edmund said. The truth can be rewritten. She looked at Alexander. You said we were your wards. What if we were more? What if, in the eyes of society, we become legitimate heirs of the St. Clair family? Edmund frowned. I would have to legitimize you. That requires a private act of Parliament. It is possible, but— And what of your mother? Alexander asked. You said she was an actress. She was, Margaret said, but she was also a gentlewoman. Her father was a baronet. She was disowned when she eloped with our father. She drew a breath. If the papers told that story, the tragic romance, the lost children, the noble duke who reunited them, it would be a very different scandal, one that might win public sympathy. You are proposing we court the newspapers, Edmund said slowly. I am proposing we control the narrative before Grant does. Margaret's eyes gleamed. You are a St. Clair. The family has survived wars, revolutions, and scandal for 300 years. Let us be the ones to write the next chapter. Alexander felt something shift in his chest. Pride, admiration, and beneath it a deeper emotion he dared not name. Then we begin tonight, he said. I will write to my solicitor in London. Edmund, you will provide names, everyone who helped you, everyone who held you, every piece of evidence you have against Grant. Edmund nodded, relief flooding his face. And the girls? The girls, Alexander said, will return to Haverford Hall. They will be protected. And tomorrow we will begin to tell the story that will save us all. The return journey was silent. The twins dozed against each other. Edmund rode with them, his head bowed, lost in thought. Margaret sat opposite Alexander, and though they did not speak, their eyes met often in the darkness. In those glances, 1,000 unspoken things passed between them. At Haverford Hall, the servants greeted Edmund with shock and tears. Mrs. Thistle had to sit down, overcome. Mr. Havers, ever proper, welcomed the prodigal brother with stiff dignity before retreating to compose himself. Margaret saw her sisters to bed, then lingered in the corridor outside their door. Alexander found her there, one hand pressed to the wall, her head bowed. You should rest, he said. I cannot, my mind will not stop. She looked up at him. All this time I thought I was only surviving. I never imagined I would have the chance to fight. You have always been fighting, Margaret. You simply never had allies before. He hesitated. You have them now. She looked at him for a long moment. I meant what I said in the garden. This, whatever this is between us, cannot continue, not while everything else hangs in the balance. I understand. Do you? She stepped closer. Because when you look at me the way you do, I forget that I am supposed to be strong. I forget that there are 100 reasons why this is impossible. Then we will both remember, he said quietly, for now. He turned to go. Her hand caught his sleeve. Alexander. The use of his name, not his title, sent a jolt through him. He turned back. Thank you, she said, for not turning us away, for believing we were worth something. You are worth everything, he said. And before she could respond, he walked away, his heart a battlefield, the war only beginning. The days that followed were a storm of letters, strategy, and barely contained tension. Edmund provided testimony against Sir Percival Grant with the precision of a man who had spent 11 months memorizing every detail of his captivity. Alexander's solicitors moved with ruthless efficiency, gathering evidence, preparing legal action. The newspapers received carefully crafted stories about the St. Clair family, stories of tragedy, resilience, and reunion that captured the public imagination. The tone, initially scandalized, began to shift. The image of three beautiful sisters, educated and genteel, caught between two powerful worlds, proved irresistible. Invitations arrived from families who had once cut them. Lady Whitmore, Cassandra, proved an unexpected ally, using her formidable social influence to smooth the path. But it was Margaret who led the campaign. She wrote letters in her elegant hand, charmed visiting journalists, managed her sister's appearances, and presented a united front with a grace that left even Alexander breathless. She was, he realized, a force of nature dressed in gray silk and pearls. And he loved her. The realization came to him on an ordinary morning, as he watched her walk through the garden with Henrietta, laughing at something the younger girl had said. The autumn light caught her hair, turning it to fire. The sound of her laughter drifted through the open window, and Alexander felt his heart constrict with a pain that was almost sweet. He loved her, not as a responsibility, not as a ward, not as a scandal to be managed. He loved her as a man loves a woman, wholly, desperately, without reason or strategy. The threat of Grant collapsed within a fortnight. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the man fled to France. His associates scattered. The bill before Parliament died in committee. Alexander received a letter from the Home Secretary congratulating him on his service to the Crown. The family gathered in the library that evening, Edmund, the twins, Margaret, and Alexander. A fire crackled in the hearth. Wine was poured. For the first time in longer than any of them could remember, there was peace. "To the St. Clairs," Edmund said, raising his glass. "Scandalous, stubborn, and unbroken." "To the St. Clairs," the others echoed. Margaret met Alexander's eyes over the rim of her glass. She smiled, a small, private smile that was meant only for him. He looked away, afraid of what she might see. Later, when the others had retired, Margaret found him in the portrait gallery, standing before the painting of his mother. The Duchess looked down at them with gentle eyes, her dark hair swept back from a serene face. "She was beautiful," Margaret said softly. "She was kind." Alexander did not turn. Too kind for this family, they broke her spirit. "Did they break yours?" The question hung in the air. He turned to face her. "I thought they had. For many years I felt nothing at all. I performed my duties. I managed the estates. I lived as a duke should live, with discipline and restraint. But I did not live." He took a step toward her. "And then you walked into my house with mud on your hem and fire in your eyes, and I felt something I had not felt in years." "What was that?" "Hope," he smiled, a rueful, almost boyish expression. "You were the most infuriating, impossible, magnificent woman I had ever encountered. You challenged me at every turn. You made me question everything I thought I knew about honor and family and duty. You made me want to be a better man." Margaret's eyes glistened. "I was terrified of you at first, not of your power or your title, but of what you made me feel. I had spent so long being strong for my sisters that I had forgotten how to be vulnerable. But with you," she swallowed, "with you, I felt safe enough to be afraid." He reached for her hands. She let him take them. "I love you, Margaret." The words came out before he could stop them. "I have loved you for longer than I care to admit. I know it is complicated. I know there will be scandal and difficulty. But I cannot pretend any longer. I love you, and I will love you until the day I die." She stared at him, and for one terrible moment he thought she would turn away. Then she laughed, a wet, broken sound, and threw her arms around his neck. "You impossible, stubborn, ridiculous man," she whispered. "I love you too. I have loved you since the night of the ball when you danced with me as if I were the only woman in the room. I love you in a way that frightens me because I have never had anything so precious to lose." He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "You will never lose me," he said. "I swear it." She pulled back, her hands framing his face. "Then marry me, not for scandal or strategy or the approval of the ton. Marry me because you cannot imagine living without me." "I cannot imagine living without you," he said. "Marry me, Margaret, be my duchess, be my heart." She kissed him then, not the tentative kiss of the garden, but a kiss of certainty and promise. And in the portrait gallery of Haverford Hall, surrounded by the watchful eyes of ancestors who had seen both glory and ruin, Alexander sent. Claire claimed his future. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the village church where they had first faced the whispers of the town. The church was filled, not with London society, though many had begged for invitations, but with tenants, villagers, and the household staff who had become their unlikely family. Edmund gave the bride away, his eyes bright with tears. The twins served as bridesmaids. Radiant in pale blue silk, Mrs. Thistle sobbed openly in the front pew, while Mr. Havers maintained a composure that fooled no one. Margaret walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk, her chestnut hair crowned with white roses. She carried no jewels but the emerald at her throat, the Duchess's emerald, now hers by right and by love. Alexander waited at the altar, and when he saw her, he forgot to breathe. The vicar spoke the ancient words, vows were exchanged, rings were blessed, and when Alexander lifted his bride's veil, he saw in her eyes the reflection of everything he had never dared to hope for. "I love you," she whispered. "Forever," he replied. The celebration lasted long into the night. There was dancing on the village green, feasting in the great hall, and laughter that echoed through corridors that had known too much silence. Edmund danced with each of his daughters in turn, and the twins glowed with a happiness that erased the shadows of their past. Late in the evening, Alexander and Margaret slipped away from the celebration. They walked hand in hand through the moonlit garden, just as they had on that terrible, beautiful night at Thornfield Park. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I am thinking that I spent 34 years preparing for every possible disaster. War, famine, political ruin. I had a plan for everything." He turned to her, his face soft in the silver light. "But I never planned for you." "And was I a disaster?" "You were the best kind of disaster, the kind that destroys the life you had and gives you the life you needed." He cupped her face in his hands. "You stole my sanity, Margaret, and I will spend the rest of my days thanking heaven for the theft." She laughed, and the sound was like music. "Then let us be mad together, Your Grace." "Together," he said, "always." He kissed her beneath the stars, and in the ancient garden of Haverford Hall, with the echoes of music and laughter drifting on the autumn breeze, the Duke of Ashworth and his unruly Duchess began there forever.